I want to talk to you a little bit today about why it is that schools are pushing for kids to come back to the classroom and ditching online instruction. What's up? It's your girl, Dr. Tureka Louis, otherwise known as Dr. Lou, your partner in success and progress. And I'm a doctor of education who's an education consultant, instructional systems designer, and instructional leader. The bottom line is I help people and organizations to succeed using education and other tools. I want to talk to you a little bit today about why it is that schools are pushing for kids to come back to the classroom and ditching online instruction. So before we get into it, if you're new to my channel and you haven't already done so, please remember to like, subscribe, and hit that notification button. And in case I didn't say it already, thank you for joining me today. Let's get into it. Now, I want to first and foremost start off by saying this is not propaganda. This video is not designed to win you over to any philosophy or political views or any other thing like that. I just want to inform as many people as possible as to what's really happening behind the scenes so that you can make informed decisions about what's best for you, your children, your family, your life experience. The first clarification I want to provide is that when I say online learning is being ditched, I'm not talking about those learning labs that your student goes into when they go to the school, sit in a computer lab, and try to catch up on an assignment or try to catch up on a class that they failed in the past. I'm talking about online learning that was offered as an alternative for coming to sit in classrooms during this period of a pandemic. So the first point I really want to drive home is that we have to acknowledge that COVID-19 hit schools really hard. I'm talking super hard. I'm talking if hitting hard was a hammer, COVID-19 was a sledgehammer, and it all but demolished the model of schooling that we have come to know and maybe hate or love, depending on your opinion and who you are. The bottom line is schools were made for students. They were made for students to sit in them. You have multi-million-dollar buildings that were made for students to be there. You have faculty and staff that were trained to deal with students when they are sitting in the classroom or in the hallways, but the bottom line is they're physically present. Everything about a school was made to house students, instructors, and their leaders. Now, the truth of the matter is, as we get into that, it's important to also understand that online learning is a totally different thing. I've got a whole live where I talk about online learning and the difference between it and in-school learning and why it didn't work for a lot of schools. You can find it on my YouTube channel, my Facebook page, as well as my Twitter and Periscope. This video is specifically about why schools are pushing for students to be physically in the classroom right now. As I said before, school's very existence depends on students being in the classroom. No students in the classroom, no money, no schools. No schools, and the education system doesn't exist anymore as we've known it before. COVID-19 did a whammy by stopping all in-person gatherings for quite a while. And when people started getting back together again, uncontrolled environments with large numbers of people, like a school, were still at the bottom of the list for places that it was okay for people to gather. Again, we see how COVID did the whammy on schools just because it made it very hard for students to attend. Drop a comment if you really saw and felt the major impact that COVID-19 had on your kids' school. Point number 2, the numbers don't lie. So let's talk a little bit about the numbers because that's super important right now. And when I say numbers, I'm talking specifically about enrollment numbers. An NPR article says that over 8,000 students chose not to enroll this year that were enrolled in Orange County schools last year in the state of Florida. That's 8,000 students in that one district alone that are not there that were there last year. That's a huge impact on that school. Now let's expand our view, and we're still in the state of Florida, and look at the fact that in Miami-Dade County, 16,000 students decided not to enroll. They are not enrolled, but they were enrolled the year before. I'm talking 2019. So now we have a total, just in those two districts alone, of 24,000 students not in school that were in school the year before. Let's look at what impact that really has on schools and how that might have driven schools to try to pressure parents to get their students back in the classroom. The bottom line is, across the country, Student enrollment is down statewide in just about every state, if not all of them. Parents don't want to send their kids to class. Go figure, it's a pandemic, right? So a lot of people aren't even going out to shop, they're not going out to eat, and when they are, they're not doing it as much. And so that's still a vast difference between sending your kids to a place where they're gonna play, they're gonna interact with their friends, they're gonna stand really close together, they're gonna be natural, right? Because adults are struggling with the restraints and not being close to one another. Can you imagine how that would be in a school? And that has probably factored into parents' decisions not to enroll. But how does that really impact your child's school, and why might they be pressuring you to bring your child to class physically? And when I say pressure, let me explain what I mean. But first and foremost, I want you to do me a favor. Drop a comment if you received a letter from your school district regarding online learning. In particular, I'm talking about a certain kind of letter. But if you did, drop a comment. This drives us to our point. A lot of parents received a letter that looks something like this. Over the last few weeks, parents have been receiving letters from school districts across the nation. Different school districts, different states, but the letters seemed almost copied and pasted, and they read a little something like this. We know that many of you wanted online learning as an option for COVID. As a matter of fact, it was recommended. However, it's only working for a small number of students, and the rest of the students aren't benefiting from it. And for that reason, we are not going to have educators teaching online anymore. If you're not happy with this decision, you have 4 options in order to fulfill the legal requirements for keeping your child enrolled in school. And I need you to understand that every state has requirements for enrollment in school. And if parents are found to be in violation of those laws associated with those requirements, then they can be arrested, all because the child is not enrolled and attending school. The parents were given 4 options if they want to stay in compliance with the law. Number 1, bring your child to school. Surprise, surprise, that's the first option. Number 2, parents can withdraw their child and homeschool them. 3, parents can withdraw their children and enroll them in a private school. And last but not least, parents can withdraw their children and send them to school in another district that offers online learning. It's important to understand that this is associated with compliance with the law. So it's not like a parent can just opt out or just go off the rails on this one and do something totally different. They have to fulfill requirements set forth by state laws, and every state has laws like this one. If your child is between the ages of 5 and 16, they have to be enrolled in a school full-time and have proof of attendance at that school on a regular basis. And if they miss too many days, again, the parent can be arrested for child neglect. So that is the compulsory law that compels parents to take their children to school. So when you combine it with the fact that schools are saying we're not going to offer online, and if you want to be enrolled in the local school that's supposed to be easy to get to and your tax dollars are paying for, you're going to have to bring your kid to school physically in order to do that. You can see how parents might feel forced to put their child in a school physically. Now, why? The question that I asked when I read these letters, because I had parents sharing them with me, I had parents sharing them on social media, I saw so many different copies of the letter, and the creepy part is they would be in different states, different school districts, but it was almost as if the language was copied and pasted. So this is a concerted effort to get students in classroom, and I wanted to know why. Because as far as I knew, nothing had really changed. We don't have any new information since the beginning of the school year that indicates that it's any safer now than it was then. So my greater question was, if there were so many concerns that we didn't send kids to school at the beginning of the school year, what changed between then and now? And for some school districts, it's only been a month. What changed between then and now to make it to where it's either okay for the kids to go, or it's just a non-issue and all that we're going to focus on is getting kids back in school because that's the way we're going to do it? What was the reason? As you can see, that letter was dated the 22nd and it was set to go into effect on the 29th. That means that from the date that the letter was printed, not from the date that the parent received it, parents had exactly 7 days, 1 week to get their stuff in order and figure out where they were going to send their kids and make a decision that for some families could be life-altering. What was the rush? So this brings me to my third point. The real reason that schools are pressuring families to make that decision right now, and while they're not saying it, they're really pushing for parents to take their children to the schools physically. To understand what's going on, we have to look at the numbers again. Remember I told you, the numbers don't lie and they don't tell a different story They're always the same, no matter how you slice it. We have to zoom out, zoom back in order to get a clear view. So let's start by looking at Orange County, Florida again. Orange County, Florida is one of 74 school districts in the state of Florida. And so if we're zooming in a little bit, the 2019 Florida Department of Education funding documents states that $9,204,663,401 were set aside in the state budget for funding for schools. You heard that right. I said 9.2 billion. Not million, billion with a B. Now that's just for the state budget. Now, while you're going to divide that, you're only going to be dividing it by 74. 9.2 billion divided by 74 is still a good amount of money, wouldn't you agree? So 9.2 billion set aside in the state budgets, but wait, there's more. In the local budgets, there was a total of $7,855,919,131 set aside for school budgets by local governments. You heard me right. $7.9 billion was set aside in local budgets for those 74 school districts. We're talking about more than $16 billion set aside for Florida schools, and that's just in the state of Florida. Why does that matter when we're looking at why schools might want students to sit physically in the classroom? Let's look a little closer. Now that we've zoomed out state level, let's zoom in a bit. Schools don't just get that money automatically. Schools get their cut of the money based on the number of students that are enrolled and attending their schools. How do they calculate that? Every year, just like clockwork, 3 days are selected for schools to do a head count. And on those days, which are known to instructors the day that they start school so that they can be prepared for it, on those days, students are counted one by one in each classroom after the bell has rung and everybody's in their seats. And then those numbers are compared to the rosters, the enrollment records that each school has. And then a number is given to the state and to the local government so that the school can then get their funding for each of those students. And before this happens, they've already calculated a per pupil spending amount. So that means for each student on that roster, the school gets an allotted amount of money. Now, in the state of Florida, that number usually hovers around between $8,000 to $10,000 per student. Multiply that number times the number of students that didn't enroll in Orange County, Florida alone, and the Orange County school districts could stand to lose $72 million. As a matter of fact, it's lost as long as those students stay not enrolled in school. And then of those students that are still there, the amount that is allotted for students that are attending online is actually lowered and is reduced in order to account for the fact that the student's not sitting in the school. So of the money that they still have left, a big slice is going to come out of that pie as well if students continue to attend online. Now, it doesn't stop there, because thanks to No Child Left Behind and legislation like it since the Bush administration, Bush number 2, there are stipulations for schools where the grades of the students are low, where students don't look like they learn things. So there's more money that will not be allotted to schools if students, by and large, don't make good grades and don't pass standardized tests. That goes back to the letter and others like it, which specifically reference that more students are failing this year than ever before. As a matter of fact, I've seen teachers lamenting on social media about the fact that they've issued more failing grades this year than they've ever seen in their lives. Now again, my live explains why that is, and it's not just because students are going to school online, so there are remedies for that. But the bottom line is we've now seen 3 major ways that schools lose money because students are not sitting in desks for one reason or another, or they're failing. That's a huge impact, and that's just 1 out of 74 school districts. If we jump over to the Miami-Dade County, we're talking about twice that, because if Orange County, Florida is missing 8,000 students, Miami-Dade is missing 16,000. So that's about twice as much money. So now we're looking at not almost 100 million, but we're looking at almost $200 million just because of lost enrollments alone, not counting online. So now you know. Now I've given enough clues to lead you to what is the real reason that students are being pressured to come back to classes right now. $72 million lost in enrollments alone, plus another cut out of that for any students that stay enrolled but go to school online, plus another cut for any student that fails, and lots of students are failing this year, and you've got a huge loss, a huge fiscal loss for schools nationwide. And some states are willing to adjust for that loss by sending kids to school, as opposed to taking the loss or doing anything else that could be done. Now, it is not my job to tell you what you should do for your family, but at minimum, you need to know the whys behind decisions that were already made for you that now leave you with a certain number of options. So when you decide whether or not your child is going to go back to that classroom, remember, even though the letters and the posts on social media and all that other stuff say that it's because kids are failing, it's really because the schools are losing money. And if you think about it, there were a lot of kids failing before. So we heard that a lot already for other policies that were changed in the past. Drop a comment if you want to know how I got those numbers, and I'll be happy to show you how you can find out for yourself what your district's per pupil spending is and how it's calculated. I'd be happy to do that. The bottom line is that when it comes to your student, their safety, and other impacts on learning, nothing has really changed since the beginning of the school year. Not much has changed since March of this year when students were taken out for the last school year. So, if you're going to make a decision as to whether or not you're sending your child back to school, remember to make it based on facts. The facts are schools are losing money. Without money, they don't exist. Going back to the date of that letter, September 22nd, the letter was written to be enacted on September 29th, puts schools kicking out the online learning and requesting that students be sitting in a classroom by the first week in October. What's special about that date? Well, based on my many years in the classroom, I know for sure that if it doesn't happen anywhere else in the state of Florida, the first head count day, remember those 3 days where they go in and count the students, and based on the numbers that they submit, they get their money for that school year? The first of those head count days is in October. It's usually the first or second week of October. Now, the first week of school, students tend to trickle in, even on a regular school year. So, by that school district cutting off online learning at the end of September, it gives students a couple of weeks to get into their seats before they have to do that count. If that count is lower, teachers will get fired, schools will close down based on those numbers. So this is a push to ensure that those numbers are as high as possible. Now, we know they're still going to be impacted. Those students that have been willing to not go to school, that have other options, they're not going to come to school just for these letters. However, if you're on the cusp, if you're on the fringes and you're struggling with it, just understand what you're really fighting for as you make your decision. There are thousands of families in New York State and other states like it that are mortgaging houses and changing their lives so that they can save up money or get cashing in their 401k so that they can send their children to private schools where there are smaller classroom settings and more abilities to control social distancing measures and all that other stuff. I'm not recommending those things to you, but my point is, it's that drastic. You do need to sit down and make a conscious decision, because this will impact your child's life in so many ways. And that's before we get into the quality of education that they will be receiving. Children are impacted by what's going on in the world around them. As a matter of fact, a lot of these grades that have come back as failing grades are due to the impact of what's going on in their environment, because so much is happening. And so that's not going to change even if the child sits in the classroom. Again, no judgment, no shade. Just be sure you know exactly what is impacting your options and make the best decision you can for your family. Parents are being told children need to come to class because they'll learn better there, but they're not being assured of how the children will be kept safe and what will ensure that the teachers and the schools are up to the task of teaching during a pandemic. Parents are not being shown that the classroom will be a safer space and a more effective learning space at all. So I ask you to do your due diligence and make the best decision for your child. Understand that some of these challenges are not across the board. They're not nationwide. They're just in some school districts. But the bottom line is that you want to know before you make the decisions about the people that you love the most. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video or found the information interesting or useful, please let me know. Like this video, drop a comment, subscribe to my YouTube channel, and don't forget to hit that notification button so that you get the notification whenever content drops. Until next time, it's your girl, Dr. Tureka Louis, otherwise known as Dr. Lou, your partner in success and progress. I'm here to help you succeed using education and other tools. Until next time, please remember, I love you, I believe in you, and for now, I am out.